Hi, and welcome to the Successful Job Search Strategies webinar hosted by the UW's Career and Internship Center. So to get us started, we're going to focus on firstly the agenda, where we're going to cover a couple of different topics, starting with understanding your job search timeline, all the way through working through career anxiety and how you can manage it. So, to get us started with that job search timeline, it's important to go into your job search knowing that it can take time. And the average is about 2 to 4 months, but that really can vary based on a lot of different factors, starting from what the economy and job market looks like to your own personal flexibility, what credentials you're bringing in, as well as the quality of both your job search materials, your job search strategy, and that extends also into the industry or industries that you're interested in working in. So, as surveyed from June 2023 graduates, we can actually see some data on how many months of earnest job searching it actually took some grads to find that first job. And you can see that the average is that 1 to 2 and 3 to 4 month range, a little over 50%. Where another large percentage, about 35%, actually got a job offer from a previous experience, like an internship with a previous employer. But you can still see that even with that, the vast majority of these students are still taking their 2 to 4 months. So, considering for your own personal timeline of when you want to get started based on that information. There are also a couple of industry hiring norms that you might want to take into account depending on what your personal interests are. So this is running from July through June. So here at UW, classes start in about September. So let's say you're interested in finance and consulting. You might be looking for a job at the start of your senior year if you wanted to get into a role directly after graduating. And that's definitely a rigorous example of hiring methods that certain companies will use, but each of these industries will also be posting different jobs year round. So just take this into account and know that this isn't a perfect list. Each company is going to have different preferences and requirements. So don't hold only to these, recommendations. Search, throughout your entire process and especially in the last quarter before you graduate. So, beyond thinking about your personal timeline, it's also really important to consider what you're actually searching for and what your job targets are. So, firstly, think about what are your preferences, and also recognize that the preferences of you and your friends and family members, they're all probably going to differ. So, thinking about what matters the most to you in your role, whether that be things like the city and state, the salary, the title that you're going to hold, or really anything else. So recognizing what you're willing to, maybe have some wiggle room with as you go further into your search as well, if you end up not having as much success right off the bat as you might have been hoping for too. But a big part of this process can really allow you to lean into doing some research about starting with here the jobs that you might want to look for, because different career paths and companies and opportunities might sound interesting to you. But how are we going to know if we don't know what exists? So, Pathway U can be a really great starting point. It is a career assessment, and it is honestly pretty great for exploring different options or just giving you new verbiage and ways to explain with keywords the types of roles that maybe you even already knew existed, but had maybe forgotten about. It only takes about 10 to 20 minutes, and you can get even more insights. Deeper insights into a lot of these different career paths as well, because they're mapped into this other platform on our website called Lightcast. And this is where you can find really specific salary insights. You can learn, it gives you the top 20 employers in your field of interest. And you can get that information even as narrow as the county level, which is really valuable depending on where you're searching or how many places you're searching. It's also great again for discovering new job titles. Similar to Pathway U, it will give you some alternative keywords and options to try out. So this can be a great way to learn more about your job options. But a little deeper than that, it can be valuable too to explore specific companies of interest. So Glassdoor, the bottom of these three, is the one that I would say is the most robust of these kind of review platforms. And each of them also has built-in opportunities for job searching. That is especially what Handshake and Indeed are primarily built for. But each of these gives you the option to learn through reviews of companies, what people say about working there, which is really what we're trying to find out ideally, is what do people say about their experience working somewhere? Is that a place that I want to be? So as you go through and maybe create a list of companies and organizations that interest you, you'll be able to better figure out what might be a good fit. And then from here, using these review sites for not only the information about like culture and what it's like to work there, but also maybe specific job postings, which can be valuable. You can also consider reaching out to UW alumni who either currently work or have worked there in the past, which can really be valuable if you're trying to get some of that insider info or maybe get some advice about, the process of applying. So thinking about, reaching out to alumni, there's also doing some research on previous students' pathways. So what if the graduates from my program, gone on to do? So the two left of these resources, Husky Landing and the LinkedIn alumni tool, allow you to do just that. You can reach out to people by using keywords and filters to figure out who is doing interesting work, who is working at interesting companies. And from those two platforms, you can really get some great advice, great insight, and figure out what your next step might be. Husky Landing in particular is specifically run through the Alumni Association. So we can see that on LinkedIn, there's over 390,000 alum that you could reach out to. Husky Landing is a much smaller platform, but it's still definitely worth it to consider making an account and reaching out to folks. Since it is a little bit newer and a little more niche, you can sometimes have a lot of success there. The third tool on this page is our student career outcomes resource, where you can actually plug in your specific major or program, or maybe one that you're considering. If you're not quite in your job search yet, you're maybe looking for different like programs and wanting to just learn about different outcomes or ones for similar majors. But it tells you from the past 5 years, what is the average outcome for students who have graduated. We have about 50% of a response rate, which is pretty good. And it will tell you again the top employers, the top job titles, and the top grad programs like schools that students go on to do after graduating from the UW at the undergrad level. So these three together can really help with figuring out kind of the answer to that question of, what have other people gone on to do? But through the whole process, if you find that you're feeling stuck or unsure, you can, of course, ask a career coach, but you can also consider asking an AI and just having some interesting and fun prompts, like what are common career titles for people with, my major? What are jobs similar to this other thing that I, think is kind of interesting? You can also consider telling it just like, hey, I'm interested in these things, like maybe some topics or specific tasks and skills. Hey, what careers match these? And from this, getting some great examples. You can also, ask follow-up questions like, hey, what are more examples? Which ones don't require a master's degree? Which ones are specifically entry level? These are some examples of ways to get more information from those initial questions and, have fun with it. Get creative and see what it, pops out for you. So now that we've talked a bit again about what your timeline is, what your search might include, we're actually going to think about some actual strategies too, starting with job boards. And these big first three are the ones that I always recommend starting with. Handshake being the first one on this list because of them, this is the one I recommend first and foremost, particularly because as UW students, maybe recent grads, this is a great platform for students and recent grads. Companies that are creating Handshake accounts and posting to the platform are doing so because they know that you are their audience and they specifically want you to apply. So because of that, it is sometimes a smaller platform. And I still recommend because of that, also applying on, Indeed and LinkedIn and some other larger platforms. So another of the opportunities to apply comes from Interstride, and this is specifically built for international students. And it has a great database of different companies who have sponsored students in the past after graduating and getting hired at these companies. So it can be a great way to know that these are all international student-friendly companies exclusively. They also have the opposite feature as well, where domestic students from the US can kind of flip their profile from an international to a domestic student. You can choose which one when you're creating your profile, and it gives you the option to search internationally. So if you were looking for companies and jobs abroad, that could also be what it's used for. So beyond that, you can consider professional associations, which would be sometimes more academic in nature, but not always, depending on the types of roles you're applying for. A basic example would be if you're interested in like marketing jobs, typing in even basically into a Google search of, marketing professional associations. And one of the big first ones that might come up is the AMA or American Marketing Association. And I use that as an example because a lot of these platforms or association websites will have, a careers tab or somewhere where you can see jobs posted specifically within that industry or field. So whether you're interested in something like marketing or biotech or astrobiology, there's plenty of ways you can find super specific boards through these associations. But lastly, I think that a really valuable tool that couples really well with a previous slide where we're talking about building a list of companies is going right to that company's HR or career site. Let's not hope that they show up on Handshake or LinkedIn job search. You can go directly to their platform. This example is for the King County careers page, where you can scroll directly through what jobs are the county is hiring for without having to wait, and you can actually see them immediately when they're posted, which can really help with maybe some application visibility too. Whenever you're on these platforms, though, particularly the large job boards, always start with your filters. So these are screenshots from Handshake and Indeed, and you can see that there's a lot of similarities between them. The same goes for LinkedIn, where you can punch in a lot of different filters that will immediately narrow things down to either things like locations that you're interested in, the type of job, like full-time, part-time, an internship, etc. And fiddling around with as many as each individual platform has can immediately make sure that you're not trying to scroll through hundreds and thousands of jobs that you're not actually going to be interested in. And it's after this that you can use that search bar to use keywords. So think about not just the job titles or the industries, but also the skills that are really interesting to you, because that is a great way to search through the whole job description because that's what's going to happen when you type in a keyword. It won't just focus on the job titles, but the full description. So create a running list of keywords that you can use in your searches and even maybe get inspiration for new keywords through the job descriptions that you're interested in, thinking about skills that you'd like to use, whether that's a technical skill like coding language or a specific like scientific method, or if it's something more basic, like an interpersonal skill like communication or teamwork, and figuring out what works best for you, especially if you're using multiple keywords in tandem. Beyond that, using maybe AI tools to ask for more keywords and examples that would be valuable, or even using in other people's LinkedIn profiles as inspiration, since it is basically a database of resumes. So keywords plus filters are definitely going to help between all the different jobs that are going to be on these platforms. Another potentially important part of your job search is going to be building relationships. So, employers are often going to identify a preferred candidate, which is someone who they will optimally choose to invite to an interview. And they're going to find those folks through networking and relationships. So, if you feel like you're struggling with your job search, applying for jobs in addition to and in conjunction with building relationships with folks, it can really be a valuable next step, even if it feels at first like it is kind of out of your comfort zone. Really, all it is having a career conversation with someone, setting up a coffee chat, maybe attending some career events, because these are some great ways for you to really just get advice from people and ask interesting questions and being able to, like, again, ask for that advice. Like, hey, I saw that you graduated from my program. What was your, first job out of, university, out of college? And you can oftentimes see that on their LinkedIn too. So asking more specific questions like, what did you like about that job? What advice would you give me if I was interested in that company? And so on. So Again, these are some great resources for where to find people. So LinkedIn, Husky Landing, and even on Handshake, you can find fellow students. You can also, especially at career events, meet with recruiters and hiring managers, but really a career conversation can happen with just anybody who you think is interesting, that you are curious about and want to ask questions to. The career fairs and employer-led workshops themselves are all in Handshake too, and there are tons that you can take advantage of because they really are one of the most valuable opportunities that you have access to through our use of Handshake. So career fairs in particular are hosted multiple times per year. We have in-person ones, usually at least once a quarter, and then a virtual one, not each quarter, but we tend to, figure out when the best times will be as we go. Employer events are hosted literally all the time. They can upload those as they see fit, and there are always new ones being posted. They are great chances to meet employers, ask questions, get business cards, and especially if you are interested in particular companies that are attending these career fairs and events, do your research. Look them up in Handshake, see what they're about, what jobs and internships they have posted, and being able to ask again those really interesting questions. But potentially most importantly, after the event, whether it's a big career fair or a small one-on-one conversation, follow up with them after that conversation is had because a lot of students skip that part. And it's really through having that, even just short email about being, thankful that they took the time to talk to you that can really help you stand out and open the door for future conversations too. So again, that events tab in Handshake is going to be where you can find the most up-to-date information about who is hosting events, which ones you can attend, and registering in advance. So the last thing that we're going to talk a bit about is managing career anxiety, which for one is entirely normal. It is a really nerve-wracking process, and a lot of people get really worried about job searching. So many people actually are going to feel pressured to succeed, whether from themselves or family members or friends. They might have self-doubt, fear of failure, and it's really hard being uncertain about what your timing and next steps are going to look like. So you are not alone in any of those feelings. And it's a lot easier said than done, but trying to shift your mindset throughout the process can be really valuable. Like starting with firstly that it's really hard right now, but I am learning and improving through the process. It's going to take time to really feel like you're confident with your strategies and what you're searching for, and that's okay if it does take time. Also recognizing that this first job out of college is not going to be your forever job. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that on this next slide, where we're going to cover some fact versus fiction. We have three, career myths that we can think about with your job search. The first one being that there is one perfect job for me. And that is not at all true because people like yourselves, you're multidimensional. You're going to change over time. And there's no way to know what future you is going to want to do or be good at. So, keeping in mind and recognizing that people hold about a dozen jobs in their lifetime. And this first one is probably not going to be the same exact thing that you do forever. So, it's okay if future you changes your mind or if current you kind of settles for something for monetary reasons or location reasons or just wanting to try something new. Another fact versus fiction here, this being the fiction, is that if you don't meet all the qualifications, you can't apply. And that is also not true because employers are often going to hire based off of transferable skills. So, what that does mean is that, well, true, you should not wait until you check every single box before you send an application in. It is worth it to put time and effort into tailoring your applications and highlighting those transferable skills, especially if you do feel like there's a gap or two in your qualifications. The last one is that maybe you're feeling like it's embarrassing to live at home after college and you need to find that job so that you can move out and not have to move back in with family members. So it's important here to recognize that the world looks a lot different than it did 20 years ago and even earlier than that. So it can actually be a really good, strong, and smart move to move back home if you do have the privilege to do so. It's long been the norm in other countries. About one in three grads are already doing this. And if you do have the ability, it can really be valuable to you in the long run. So throughout this entire process, trying to manage your expectations. This is the final thing that we'll talk about today. Because keeping in mind that rejection isn't failure is really important. It can sometimes feel really daunting when you are hearing no or getting ghosted by employers. You're not hearing anything back. You're probably going to have that experience. You're going to hear that a lot more before you hear some yeses and get those interview requests. And that does not reflect your potential, but rather the process. There are a lot of applicants. There are, potentially internal hires. Maybe it's just the timing of when you saw a job being posted. There's so many things that are outside of your control. So instead, if possible, trying to focus on what you can control. So tweaking your materials, making sure that you are taking that extra time to tailor those applications, asking for feedback, whether through career conversations from friends, family, mentors, professors, career coaches, anyone who you think can really help you get answers to your questions and uncertainties. And through it all, trying to stay open to new paths, because if one thing is continually not working, it's not a bad idea to consider, switching gears or trying out something new. And the final thing is that recognizing that small steps count. Every time you make a new search, send a new message, send out an application, that's progressing. And that's you learning something new about the process, learning what works, and tweaking and refining your own process. So, as best you can, ultimately try and stay resilient, keep moving forward through this process, even if it does feel like it's going low and slow, and the Career Center will be here to help you through the whole process. So thanks for tuning in. And if there are other questions, you're always welcome to meet with a career coach at the Career and Internship Center. Thank you.